Chapter 17 Biology Theory Video 8. We are going to discuss about bottleneck effect. So this is something similar to the founder effect, but there are the results are a little different from the founders effect, because in founders effect there is a large population in existence in some parts of the world. But here when you talk about the bottleneck effect, we don't actually have a larger population. We don't talk about a larger population. So what happens here is actually as a result of some activity, the original population has reduced drastically, and that results in the reduction in their gene pool. Now this gene pool reduction will result in a situation where they cannot actually adapt to new conditions because of the lack of different kinds of alleles. So the chances of mutations being resulted is also low, and as a result, what happens is their fitness is actually lesser to survive the different conditions. Now, one good example is the cheetah. But their scientific name is Acinonyx jubatus. So these animals are in danger of extinction because they are very similar. They are genetically almost identical to each other. The reason for that is actually when you take these animals, they are very very small isolated groups exist. So these isolated groups breed with close relatives. So that means their genetic changes are very less. There are no new alleles are getting added. So their genetic pool is quite limited. So it is said that only 5% of the usual genetic pool of a normal species is present in cheetah. So as a result, they are at higher risk of going extinct. Most of these animals have been killed off as a result of climate change after the end of last ice age, and this has resulted in something known as evolutionary bottleneck. And this evolutionary bottleneck is a situation where the population of a species has dropped so low that the gene pool is greatly reduced. Write down a note on this. The bottleneck effect. As a result of the population of a species falling to a very low level, resulting in the loss of a large number of alleles, therefore making their gene pool to dwindle significantly, an evolutionary bottleneck is created. An evolutionary bottleneck is created. For example, cheetahs are experiencing an evolutionary bottleneck and are threatened with extinction. Then when we move on to the Hardy-Weinberg principle, here what we do is, this is now, so far what we have done is we have looked at the frequencies of the allele frequencies qualitatively. That means we have not taken their values, or quantitatively how much, or we haven't done the calculations. So now if there is a if there is a particular phenotypic trait, that is, if there is a feature that is controlled by two alleles of a single gene, it would be capital A and simple A. So then there is a possibility of three genotypes: capital A, capital A, capital A, capital A, simple A, capital A, capital A, capital A, simple A, and simple A, simple A. These are going to be the three options that are going to be available. These are the genotypes that are going to be there. So these genotypes, this is something that you have learned already. So based on these genotypes, we do calculations related to a large randomly mating population, and this frequency of a genotype will give us an idea as to the proportion of a total population, and how much it is going to affect a certain characteristic. The total for a total population, the frequency of a genotype, the total frequency of a genotype is 1, and frequencies would be given in decimals. We use letter P to represent the frequency of the dominant allele A and the population A in the population, and letter Q to represent the frequency of the recessive value A. So then P plus Q is going to be 1. That is the first equation. So that means we have if there is a offspring inheriting a dominant allele from both parents is P squared, P into P. Then recessive allele, the chance of offspring inheriting a recessive allele is Q into Q, that is Q squared. Then dominant from father and recessive from mother, that is going to be PQ, P into Q. Then the vice versa is also PQ. That is the chance of offspring inheriting a dominant from mother and a recessive from father, that is PQ. So all these possibilities, P squared plus 2PQ plus Q squared is 1. Right? Now if you are, now you don't have to remember these equations. They say that it will be given to you, this equation will be given to you when a question is asked. You will have to, however, know how these questions, these values are used. So that would be explained in this worked exercise. Then you will be able to understand why these are required and why we need to do these calculations. But one thing that we need to remember is the Hardy-Weinberg calculations will not apply if the population is small or if there is a significant selective pressure against one of the genotypes. So they have to be kind of similar. Then migration of individuals carrying one of the two alleles into or out of the population, or non-random mating, if that is a part of this, then you can't carry out, you can't actually do the Hardy-Weinberg calculations in related to those. Then why do we need these calculations? Now, if we need to determine the ratios of the different genotypes of a population, then we can use the predicted ratios to find out in the next generations what is going to happen to in the next generations. So if there is a difference, we can actually we can use some value called chi-squared test. So this, if there is a significant migration or non-random mating, if you take that out of this, we can find out what directional selection is occurring in the population. Right? So then we can actually, if there is a change, we will be able to understand what the change is. Right. So that is actually, if you are going to get any question out of this, you won't be asked about the significance, but you will be given a question to question of this, something like this worked example for you to do. Now let's look at this worked example before writing the note. Imagine a population in which 1% of the individuals show the recessive phenotype. Another way of stating this is to say that the frequency of these individuals is 0.01. These individuals must have the genotype simple A. You therefore know that the frequency of AA individuals, which is represented by Q squared, is 0.01. Therefore, Q is square root of 0.01, which is equal to 0.1. Then you use the equation 1. So P plus Q is equal to 1. So as a result, you will get 1 minus 0.1, 0.9 is the answer. That means the frequency of the dominant allele is 0.9 and the frequency of the recessive allele is 0.1. Then you can calculate the frequency of the homozygous dominant and the heterozygous genotypes using the equation P squared plus 2PQ plus Q squared. So now you know P squared is 0.9 squared, that is 0.81. Then heterozygous genes is 2PQ, 2 into 0.9 into 0.1, 0.18. So if you add all of these things, P squared plus 2PQ plus Q squared, it should be 1 again. So you would be able to understand that it is correct. Let's write down a note on this. The Hardy-Weinberg principle is a way of calculating the proportions of each genotypes present in a large randomly mating population. In a population where a particular phenotypic triad is controlled by 2 alleles of a single gene, capital A, simple a, there can be 3 genotypes, capital A, capital A, simple a, and simple a, simple a. Then write down, if the frequency of the dominant allele is P and frequency of the recessive allele is Q, then the sum of these two would be 1 because there are only 2 alleles. P plus Q equals 1. Right? Then, therefore, the chance of an offspring inheriting a dominant allele from both parents would be P into P, that is P squared. Leave a line and write. The chance of an offspring inheriting a recessive allele from both parents would be Q into Q squared. Then the chance of offspring inheriting a dominant allele from father and a recessive allele from the mother equals P into Q, PQ. And the chance of an offspring inheriting a dominant allele from the mother and a recessive allele from the father, P into Q equals PQ. Because these are the only combinations, we can say that P squared plus 2PQ plus Q squared equals 1. Right? I hope you understood. If you do not understand, please go through this worked example once again, then you will be able to understand. If you have any further questions, please ask. And after that, do question number 5.